Dr. Alan Reed was a respected geology expert, while I was just a rural woman with only a high school education. We had been married for 40 years, and for 35 of those, Alan had been unhappy with our marriage. After his sudden death, I finally gained control of the remote and of my own time. Every day, I watched the meaningless soap operas Alan used to mock. I ate the street food he always called junk. On my 65th birthday, I ordered myself a durian crepe cake and celebrated my first birthday that truly belonged to me. Just as I was about to make a wish, my daughter, whom I hadn't spoken to in a long time, called. "Mom, today's Dad's 67th birthday. Don't forget to fry up some of those little yellow croakers he liked. Oh, and Uncle and Aunt already went to the cemetery, so you don't need to go. Otherwise, Dad might not be happy down there." When the call ended, I sat for a long time in the absolute stillness of the room, stunned. After a while, I lit the candles and made the only wish I've ever truly had in my life. If I could live again, I would never want to have anything to do with Alan Reed. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day Alan first came to our village. "Lisa, Lisa." Someone patted me twice on the back. I jerked my head up. "You silly girl, what are you daydreaming for? Hurry up and pick one to take home." I turned around and saw Aunt Mary's dark face and her bright white smile, the low houses in front of us, and the familiar faces gathered in small groups nearby. In that moment, I realized with absolute clarity. My wish had come true. I had really gone back to the day when that group of college students, including Alan Reed, first arrived in our village. After the college entrance exams were reinstated, many of the young people, who had once been sent to the countryside, managed to enter university and return to their former lives. Because of the unique geological structure of our area, Alan Reed and his classmates, who were studying geological exploration, were assigned by their university to our village for fieldwork. The dorms prepared for them had just been destroyed by a mudslide, so the village chief asked every family whose homes were still intact to free up a room for the students. There were about 20 of them in total, but only 2 were girls. In my previous life, I had come late to help clean and prepare, so I ended up with the one who looked the most honest and quiet, Alan Reed. That was how my fateful entanglement with him began. Now, seeing the 2 female students being claimed by enthusiastic village aunts, I hurried over and grabbed Aunt Mary, who lived next door. "Auntie, my dad's still out getting supplies and won't be back for a while. Can you let this sister stay with me instead?" Aunt Mary hesitated, but didn't refuse. "All right, but you should ask if she's okay with it." The girl Aunt Mary had chosen was named Lucy Miller. Unlike the other girl whose face I barely remembered, Lucy would later become Alan Reed's colleague for decades. When the rumors about Alan and Sharon White spread all over the institute, Lucy had stood up for me, speaking out on my behalf. True to her straightforward personality, Lucy didn't refuse. After a brief introduction, she picked up her luggage and followed me home. Even though decades had passed, I had walked this road home countless times in my dreams. The joy and sorrow of being given another chance stirred quietly in my heart. After settling Lucy into the room I had cleaned and prepared, I sat in the small, shabby shop and drifted into my thoughts. "Excuse me, can I get a bar of soap?" The voice from my memories sounded again. I froze and looked up, straight into the eyes of a much younger Alan Reed. When I just stared at him silently, he waved his hand in front of my face. "Hi." The scent of soap mingled with the damp air. I snapped back to my senses, picked up a bar of soap from the counter, and handed it to him. "What's your name? Have we met before?" Seeing the confusion and curiosity in Alan Reed's eyes, I kept my expression cold. "There are plenty of people who look like me. My name has nothing to do with you." Alan gave an awkward smile, then left, glancing back at me every few steps as he walked away. From the moment I heard his voice, my heart had been beating unevenly. I was terrified that Alan, like me, had also been reborn. But then I remembered what he had said the day before he died. "Lisa Green, the biggest regret of my life is marrying you. You ruined the future I should have had with Ava." Thinking about that, I figured if he really did have memories from the previous life, maybe it wouldn't be such a bad thing after all. Because of a heavy rainstorm, the road connecting our village to the outside world was washed out. It wasn't until the third night that my father finally came back, bringing a new shipment of goods. After greeting Lucy Miller, he called me into his room. "I heard a few of those college boys who came this time are pretty good looking," he said. "You'd better seize the opportunity, try to settle something before they leave." My mother had passed away early. My father turned down 7 or 8 women who wanted to become my stepmother, and raised me on his own. Maybe because of that, he always saw me as a child. Or maybe he just couldn't bear the thought of me marrying and leaving home too soon. But after all the girls my age in the village had married and had children, he started to worry about my marriage. The new marriage law had just gone into effect at the beginning of the year, and I had only turned 22 months earlier. During that time, my father had every matchmaker from miles around, but he didn't like a single man they introduced. In my previous life, because Alan Reed was staying in our house, my father happened to return from a supply trip and saw him helping me clean the yard. When he learned that Alan was educated, capable, and came from a city household, with an older brother serving in the military, he became very interested. After that, he started creating opportunities for us to be alone together. Alan had never been in a relationship before, and during his stay in the village, he fell ill once. I was the one who took care of him the whole time. Not long after his group returned to school, Alan brought his parents to our home to propose. For the first few years after our marriage, things were actually quite good. Alan was charming and attentive. Every day after work, he'd bring me some small gift. When our daughter was born, he was overjoyed, calling me the heroine of the Reed family, since his parents adored little girls. But everything changed after Alan went on a geological expedition that lasted 6 months. He came back looking worn out and distant, and often locked himself in his study. He no longer told me stories about his fieldwork, and when our eyes met, I could see emotions there I couldn't understand, complex, heavy, and unreadable. Noticing how little he was eating, I worried about his health. I dug up our once flower-filled yard and turned it into a vegetable garden, even keeping 2 chickens in one corner. To enrich the soil, I tried to find fertilizer, but when I couldn't, I began composting at home. That single act caused an uproar in the residential compound. It was the first time Alan and I had ever fought. I didn't understand what I had done wrong. Everything I did was for his health. Not until I met Sharon White in person did I begin to understand. After Alan was transferred to a new department, Sharon came to our home once. She knocked on the door while I was fertilizing the vegetable patch in the yard. My 4-year-old daughter ran to answer it, and when she didn't come back, I knew something was off. When I went outside, I saw them standing close together at the doorway, Alan Reed and Sharon White, talking quietly, their heads almost touching. Even though decades have passed, I can still clearly remember that day. Sharon White was wearing a simple white dress, her hair in 2 braids. The breeze lifted the faint fragrance from her body, washing away some of the unpleasant smell in the yard. Suppressing the strange feeling in my chest, I wanted to invite her into the house, but before I could even speak, Alan Reed covered his nose and grabbed Sharon's arm, pulling her back a few steps. "Can't you smell how awful it is here? And you still want to invite someone inside? Aren't you ashamed?" My daughter covered her nose too. She wanted to come closer but hesitated, whispering shyly, "Mommy stinks, but Auntie smells good." That was the first time I truly understood what embarrassment felt like, what humiliation really was. And I finally realized why Alan had been so angry about me composting in the yard. It wasn't about the smell at all. He thought I had embarrassed him in front of the other families, that I'd made him lose face. He regretted marrying me, a coarse, simple woman from the countryside. But I had done all that for his health. I had worked myself to exhaustion just to grow fresh food for him, and in the end, all I got in return was his disgust. "Dad," I said, "I heard the food factory in town is hiring soon. I'd like to give it a try. I'm not in a hurry to get married." Our village had one of the best living conditions in the area. Thanks to my father's years of connections and savings, he had opened the first and only general store in the village. We never worried about food or money. Unlike most parents who sent their children out early to earn wages, my father wanted me to find a good husband someone stable and dependable, because he didn't want me to suffer hardships after marriage. But what he could never understand was that sometimes the pain in your heart is far worse than any physical struggle. As expected, the moment he heard I wanted to get a job, his first reaction was disapproval. "We don't need you to make money. You're not getting any younger. If you keep waiting, people will start talking." 6 years after I married Alan Reed, my father died in an accident on his way to visit me. Around that same time, I learned the truth about Alan's improper relationship with Sharon White. Grief and anger consumed me, and in my emotional collapse, I lost the baby I was carrying. The damage to my womb meant I could never get pregnant again. In this new life, seeing my father's face filled with warmth and concern made the reality of my rebirth hit me harder than ever. I stepped forward and buried myself in his arms. "Dad, life is long. I don't want to get married too soon. I want to see how far I can go on my own." After a long silence, my father finally agreed to let me try. In my previous life, I didn't understand much. I thought graduating from high school was already a good education. But after spending a lifetime as a housewife, I realized that strength only comes from yourself. No matter what I wanted to do, I still needed to keep learning. It was true that I wanted to work at the food factory, but what I didn't tell my father was that once things settled down, I planned to enroll in night school. Lucy Miller's older sister worked at the food factory, and through her, I learned about the factory's hiring requirements and testing process from previous years. Time passed quickly, and before I knew it, I had been back for nearly 20 days. That afternoon, Lucy came running home, visibly flustered. Seeing how anxious she was, I immediately asked what was wrong. "One of the male students suddenly has a fever," she said breathlessly. "I brought some medicine with me when I came here. Let's see if any of it helps." Before I could respond, Lucy grabbed a small bag and hurried out the door. A bad feeling crept into my chest. I glanced at the calendar, and sure enough, it was the exact same day that Alan Reed had fallen ill in my previous life. Back then, I had already started to develop feelings for him, thanks to my father's constant encouragement. That morning, I had noticed something was off the moment Alan woke up. The first time around, my father and I had rushed Alan Reed to the hospital together. But this time, Alan was staying at old Grandma Zhang's house in the village. She was elderly and lived with her unmarried, disabled son. Both of them struggled to take care of themselves, so of course, they didn't notice when Alan fell ill. Pulling my gaze away from the calendar, I forced myself to put the thought aside. When Lucy Miller came back later, she brought up Alan's condition herself. "Good thing the villagers had experience," she said. "They realized he'd been bitten by a rat. The doctor said if we'd been even a little later, getting him to the hospital, it might have been too late." Although I resented Alan, it wasn't to the point where I wished him dead. I just listened quietly, treating Lucy's account of the day as something to pass the time. The next day was the food factory's recruitment day. I got up early and went into the city. After finishing the written exam, I walked around for a bit before heading home in the afternoon. When I saw Alan, I was taken aback. He was standing at the bus stop waiting, his face pale and his whole body weak and unsteady. As soon as I got off the bus, I gave him a quick glance, then looked away and started walking home. But Alan's next words made me freeze in place. "Lisa, you came back earlier today, didn't you? You knew what was going to happen to me. Why didn't you warn me? Do you have any idea I almost died yesterday?" I turned to look at him, puzzled. "Are you talking to me? Who's Lisa?" Before Alan met Sharon White, he used to call me Lisa in a soft, affectionate tone, but after he fell for Sharon, he stopped using it altogether. From then on, he either called me by my full name, Lisa Green, or addressed me coldly as Mrs. Reed. When I looked at him, confused, and asked what he meant, he didn't believe a word I said, but he couldn't explain why either. He could only stand there, watching helplessly as I walked away. After that day, I made an even greater effort to avoid contact with any of the university students except for Lucy. When the food factory posted the written exam results, I went into the city again. Seeing my name on the list of candidates who had passed, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. The interview was scheduled for 2 days later. When I got home, I brought some pastries I'd bought in the city to Lucy's room to thank her and her sister for their help. She accepted them awkwardly, her cheeks slightly pink. "Lisa, you're too polite. Tomorrow I'll call my sister and ask her what to expect during the interview." "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say," I told her with a smile. What I didn't expect was that when Lucy made that call, Alan Reed overheard her. On the morning of the interview, he intercepted me on my way to the bus stop, blocking my path. "Lisa Green, why are you pretending you don't know me? Things weren't like this last time. You've never worked a day in your life? You won't be able to handle this kind of job." Alan's voice was loud enough to draw attention from the people already on the bus. Feeling all those curious eyes on me, I frowned and shoved him back. "Are you out of your mind? What nonsense are you talking about? If you keep harassing me, I'll call the police and report you for indecent behavior." In those days, being accused of harassment was a serious crime. Even though Alan hadn't actually done anything inappropriate, my firm tone and the presence of so many witnesses left him no way to defend himself. People who had assumed Alan and I were close immediately changed their expressions. Seeing that, Alan could only swallow his anger and step aside, watching as I boarded the bus and rode away. Later, someone must have mentioned the scene to my father. When I got home, he said, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I went to speak with Alan's supervising professor. As long as I'm around, no one will dare bully you." I hadn't been afraid at all, but hearing him say that still filled me with warmth. Maybe being given a second chance was heaven's way of rewarding me a little extra. I passed the interview smoothly and completed all the paperwork for my new job. The food factory had dorms for employees, but new hires weren't eligible to stay there yet. Fortunately, with Lucy Miller's sister helping me, I managed to rent a small room near the factory. The rent was cheap, and even after paying for it, I still had plenty left from my monthly salary. Once everything was settled, I called my father to tell him my new address in the city. The moment I hung up, I went straight to the night school to enroll. As soon as I signed my name on the admission form, I felt lighter, as if the invisible thread that had bound me since my rebirth had finally snapped. I had officially stepped onto a completely different path from my last life. On my first day off, I carried a bottle of wine I'd bought for my father and went home to visit. When he saw how different I looked, radiant and full of energy, he was so happy that he had a couple of extra drinks. After I washed the dishes and came out into the courtyard, I saw him leaning back, gazing at the moonlight. "Do you see that?" he murmured softly, as if speaking to my late mother. "Our daughter's grown up, don't worry, as long as I'm still here, I won't let anything hurt her." Lucy, who was leaning against the doorframe, heard him and whispered to me, "Your dad's the most devoted man I've ever met. I hope someday I can find someone who loves me that much." I smiled, but didn't respond. Once, I had wished for the same thing. That's why I'd been so happy when Alan Reed and I first confessed our feelings for each other, so sure that love would last forever. And when I later discovered his betrayal, I had refused to believe it. Even though my father's devotion to my mother had made him the subject of gossip for years, I'd grown up surrounded by that kind of love and loyalty. Never once did I imagine that my own marriage would crumble so quickly after it began. In my previous life, I'd been bound by marriage for decades. This time around, I swore I would never let myself fall into the same trap again. I thought that once Alan finished his internship, our paths would finally diverge for good. But one evening after my night school class, I ran into him by chance at the school gate. The moment he saw me, he strode toward me. "You're still going to class? Lisa Green, what are you trying to do?" Because I'd stayed behind to ask the teacher a few questions, most of the students had already left. With no one around to see us, Alan dropped all pretense of restraint. "Just admit it," he demanded. "You were reborn too, weren't you?" I didn't understand why a man who had spent the final day of his previous life regretting marrying me would still be so obsessed with this question. But now that I had a steady job and a clear goal for my life, I decided to end things cleanly once and for all. "Yes," I said calmly. "So what? You regretted marrying me in the last life, and I regretted marrying you just as much. Since we've both been given another chance, you should go chase whatever it is you missed out on." instead of trying over and over to make yourself matter to me. Alan froze for a long time before finally speaking again, his voice shaking. How can you say that? What right do you have to regret marrying me? I never made you work a single day. I provided for you, fed you, sheltered you. You never suffered a bit. You're just a country woman who never even went to college. And yet my students called you professor's wife. You got your reputation and your comfort because of me. What right do you have to regret it? Alan's face turned red with anger, his neck stiff with pride. But as I listened to his accusations, I could only find them absurd. The further our marriage had gone, the wider the gap between us had become. He rarely came home, always out leading field expeditions or staying in the dorms on campus. Everyone said he was dedicated to his work, a role model of commitment and discipline. But no one knew. He stayed away because he didn't want to come home. I took care of our child and his parents all by myself, struggling through each day. Starting from the time Alan Reed turned 40, only half of his monthly salary ever made it into my hands. His parents needed money for medicine and doctor visits. Our daughter's schooling required money, and then there were the daily living expenses. I had to pinch every penny, unable to even save enough in a whole year to buy myself a new dress. In my previous life, the day after Alan's affair with Sharon White became public gossip, my father died in an accident. Then, after I lost the baby and damaged my health, Alan's parents forced him to kneel at my hospital bedside and swear that I would be his only wife in this lifetime. Maybe the rumors made life difficult for him at the university, or maybe guilt finally caught up with him. But Alan agreed. After that, he never mentioned Sharon's name again. To avoid suspicion, Sharon even applied to transfer to another department. But when Sharon's husband later passed away, Alan secretly rekindled his relationship with her behind everyone's back. He gave half his salary to Sharon and her child, and he spent all his spare time with them. Our daughter was only 4 years old when she began to understand that her parents' relationship was falling apart. When she turned 17, she saw it for herself. The father who said he was too busy to attend her birthday dinner was sitting in a restaurant with a young boy. A boy only a few years younger than she was. Even after being caught, Alan didn't try to hide it. He claimed self-righteously that he was only helping Sharon and her son get through hard times, accused me of being petty, and said I was poisoning our daughter's mind with unhealthy thoughts. Meanwhile, he left me to care for his aging parents alone, calling it my duty as a daughter-in-law. If it hadn't been for the kindness his parents had shown me, if I hadn't seen how devastated they already were after losing their eldest son, I might have taken my daughter and left long ago. The first year, Alan started giving half his salary to Sharon. Life for the rest of us, his parents, our daughter, and me, became unbearably difficult. Alan's older brother had died during a mission while shielding his comrades. His widow took half of the compensation money and remarried with their child. The other half of the pension, Alan persuaded his mother to hand over to him under the pretext of needing it for research. At our hardest time, the 4 of us spent a whole week eating nothing but thin porridge, so watery you could barely see a grain of rice, and coarse corn buns. Meanwhile, Alan and Sharon were seen dining in a state-run restaurant, enjoying full meals every day. That New Year, Alan finally came home after being gone for months. Seeing no decorations, no festive air, and me wearing the same faded clothes I'd washed to the point of turning white, he scolded me in front of his parents and our daughter for being incapable of managing a household. Alan's father grabbed his belt and started hitting him, while our daughter cried and poured out how hard and miserable our year had been. His mother cursed him furiously, her voice trembling with anger and grief. I stood there expressionless, meeting Alan's eyes evenly. That was the first time I ever saw guilt in them. Maybe it was because I still longed for a peaceful family, or maybe it was the influence of my father's patience and loyalty. But when Alan finally apologized, I softened again. And just like that, we spent a lifetime together. I don't know when it began, when the daughter who once despised Sharon started to stand on the same side as Alan. I only remember the first time I heard her yell at me, saying that I made both her and her father ashamed. My heart shattered. Alan had always looked down on me, saying I embarrassed him, that I was a burden. But what hurt most was that even the daughter I had raised with my own hands began to resent me, saying I was small-minded, only caring about our little home, unlike her Aunt Sharon, who wherever she went was confident, admired, and radiant, the kind of woman she wanted to become. My husband didn't love me, my daughter despised me, and I, disgusted with them and with myself, forced myself to keep going. I refused to divorce Alan Reed. I wanted him and Sharon White to spend the rest of their lives unable to stand openly side by side, no matter how much they longed to. After briefly revisiting that muddled, painful past life, I felt a chill settle behind my eyes as I met Alan's stunned gaze. I was your family's maid. Looked down on, ordered around my whole life. You think I should be grateful for that kind of trash existence? Without waiting for his response, I turned and walked away, ignoring whatever else he shouted after me. From then on, my days fell into a steady rhythm. Work, study, rest. It had been decades since I'd last studied, and I'd forgotten most of what I'd learned in high school. But I refused to give up. I believed in myself. Outside of working hours, I didn't waste a single minute. If I wasn't reading, I was doing practice exercises. I had no intention of staying at the food factory forever. My goal was to earn and save enough money to bring my father to live in the city. During my breaks, I quietly gathered information about prices, rental costs, and potential business spots. There was an open market not far from the factory, an ideal place for my father to set up a small stall. Life in the village wasn't bad, but in my last life, my father had never truly known comfort, even to his dying day. Now that I had another chance, I refused to waste it. I wanted to change his life, to let him see more of the world beyond our small village. After asking around, I learned that it was now possible to apply for an individual business license. So on one of my days off, I went back home to discuss it with him. At that time, the government neither supported nor prohibited small private businesses, so to be cautious, I wanted to see if he could find someone to help with the paperwork. When I told him my plan, my father was silent for a long time. Worried he might not agree to move to the city, I decided to play my strongest card. Dad, I said, I'm planning to take the college entrance exam next year. I've been going to night school every day. But my classes finish pretty late, and not long ago, a thug tried to follow me. Before I could even finish, he slammed his hand on the table. Then we're going, no question about it. My daughter's out there working hard to build a life. How could I hold her back? Tomorrow, I'll go with you to the city, and we'll get that license taken care of. My father had once been a soldier, and even after leaving the army, he stayed in touch with comrades working in different fields. Hearing him say that, I knew the battle was half won. He'd already decided to move to the city. At first, my small rented room was barely big enough for one person. But now that my father was on board, I started looking for a larger place. I asked around through my coworkers and found one near Lucy Miller's home. While I was negotiating rent with the landlord, Lucy happened to see me. Lisa, are you moving here? She asked excitedly. I nodded. Yeah, that's the plan. Her face lit up. That's great. Now I can come by and talk to you all the time. You have no idea how much gossip I've been saving up with no one to share it with. People back then were generally more reserved. They kept things bottled up. Lucy, 2 years older than me, had already shared plenty of stories back when she stayed in my home, mostly about her classmates and her sister. She'd said her sister didn't like listening to her chatter, and she couldn't find anyone else to talk to. Without Alan Reed in my life, everything seemed to move forward so smoothly. My father successfully obtained the business license, and by the 5th month since I'd returned to this time, he officially moved in with me in the city. He didn't shut down the small shop in our village, though. Instead, he left it in the hands of someone he trusted to manage it. He already had plans of his own. Once the license was in place, he wanted to rent a small storefront and start fresh in the city. My father had retired from the army through a business discharge, and when he left service, the government gave him a small sum of money. Over the years, he had managed that money carefully and resourcefully, so when it came time to open a shop in the city, he at least had some confidence. But after asking around and learning about the high rent prices for storefronts and the challenges of doing business in the city, his enthusiasm began to fade. That was when I handed him all the money I had saved and told him my plan. "Dad, don't worry too much about the money. I'm planning to leave my job. That way, we'll have enough to start the shop, and I'll also have time to help you." My father was skilled with his hands, and with what I'd learned from my past life, I suggested that he start with a small snack shop. The concept was a bit ahead of its time, and with affordable prices, the shop immediately drew people's attention. That the business might interfere with my studies, my father hired someone to help once things stabilized, urging me to focus entirely on preparing for my exams. During this period, Lucy Miller brought me plenty of gossip, among them news about Alan Reed. "Remember that guy who got bitten by a rat?" she asked one day. I nodded silently. Lucy continued, "No idea what's gotten into him. A while ago, he insisted on joining a newly formed geological exploration team in the neighboring province. He'd only been there for less than a month before he suddenly demanded to come back. Our teacher had originally arranged a good position for him, but now every time his name comes up, the teacher just shakes his head." The place Lucy mentioned happened to be Sharon White's hometown. So, it seemed Alan was trying to recreate his past, planning to meet Sharon earlier this time. But for some reason, he ended up coming back instead. A few days later, Lucy shared more gossip, and piecing it together with my memories from my previous life, I finally understood the full story. In my last life, when Alan met Sharon, he was already somewhat accomplished. Sharon, ignoring the fact that he was married, had approached him willingly, hoping to secure herself a better life. But in this life, Alan was nothing more than a freshly graduated college student. No power, no money, no influence. When he found Sharon, she happened to be walking with another man. Alan didn't think much of it, assuming Sharon would still act toward him as she had in the past, gentle and charming. What he didn't know was that the man was Sharon's childhood sweetheart. Alan's sudden intrusion ruined their rare chance to spend time together. When he tried to persuade Sharon to leave with him, she refused, and both she and her companion harshly rebuked him. Alan believed Sharon just didn't recognize him yet, that she hadn't seen the brilliance he would one day show in his work. So, when Sharon officially joined the exploration team, Alan approached her again, trying to make a grand impression. But this time, Sharon reported him to their supervisors. The newly formed exploration team was small, and everyone there knew one another. Naturally, they couldn't stand Alan's arrogance or self-importance. He was ostracized to the point where he could no longer function there, and eventually, his university instructors had to transfer him back. That winter, several snowfalls blanketed the city. The roads were icy, and everyone walked carefully to avoid slipping. Worried that my father might fall on his way to pick me up, I told him not to come, and that I'd walk home with a classmate who lived nearby. After class that day, I heard people whispering that someone was standing outside the school gate, nearly frozen solid, refusing to leave. My heart tightened. I feared it might be my stubborn father. I hurried outside, pushing through the crowd. When I caught sight of the man standing there, snow piled thickly on his shoulders, I exhaled in relief. It wasn't my father. I was just about to head home when I heard someone call my name. I turned around, and to my shock, that half-frozen man was struggling to walk toward me. When the figure was about 2 meters away, I finally recognized the ice sculpture. It was Alan Reed. Snow had gathered thickly on his shoulders, and even his eyebrows and eyelashes were crusted with ice. "What do you want now?" I asked coldly. Hearing the chill in my voice, Alan rubbed his face hard, his breath shaky. "Lisa, please. Let's talk." It was freezing out, and the last thing I wanted was to waste time on him in the cold. I didn't even bother to look at him again. I turned and started walking home. Alan tried to step forward to grab my hand, but the ground was slick with ice. He slipped and fell hard, sliding several feet before coming to a stop. Some passers-by rushed over to help him up, but he could barely stand, clutching his waist with a grimace. "Lisa Green," he stammered through chattering teeth. "Aren't you going to help me?" But when he looked up, I was already gone, so far down the street that not even my shadow was visible. The next day, night school was closed, so I went to help out at my father's snack shop. Lucy Miller came by after work, bringing her usual gossip. "Remember that classmate who got bitten by a rat?" she said with a grin. "Guess what? He's in trouble again. He fell and broke his tailbone. He's in the hospital right now." I remembered hearing the loud thud the night before and had guessed Alan must have slipped. I hadn't expected the fall to be that serious. Lucy went on, "Honestly, that guy must have some kind of bad luck following him around. A person that unlucky either offended something supernatural or there's something wrong with him. I'm definitely keeping my distance from now on." Her words caught my attention. In my last life, Alan had been despicable in love, but brilliant in his field. His colleagues and students all respected him. If this life's Alan had followed the same path, humble, steady, focused, he would have reached the same heights again. But ever since the rat bite, he'd changed. During fieldwork, he constantly interrupted his teachers, always showing off and contradicting them, completely different from the modest young man he used to be. He'd even made a fuss about joining another exploration team, and then pulled strings to get himself transferred back. Many people were fed up with him. In my previous life, Alan had become one of the most respected geological experts in the country, a man at the very top of the field. With his knowledge and experience, it was only natural that he couldn't resist commenting on the outdated exploration methods of this era. But he was using the wrong approach. Now he was nothing more than a fresh graduate with no real experience. He couldn't treat his professors the way he used to treat his students. For the first time, I truly felt grateful to heaven for giving me another chance. My life was steadily getting better, while Alan seemed to be spiraling toward the end he probably deserved. That year, my father and I had a wonderful new year. He was happy because life finally held something new, something to look forward to. I was happy because I knew I hadn't wasted the miracle of my second chance. After the holiday, there were only a few months left before the college entrance exams. Even on my rest days, my father refused to let me help at the shop. He insisted I relax and keep my mind clear. One day, while wandering around the city, I passed by the house I'd lived in for so many years in my previous life. When I looked up, my eyes met those of a woman stepping out the front door. It was Mrs. Reed, Alan's mother, much younger than I remembered her. At that time, Alan's older brother was still alive, and she looked healthy and at peace. I quickly looked away and kept walking without a word. Night school lessons were particularly advanced. When the teachers couldn't answer certain questions, I turned to Lucy instead. She explained them far better than anyone at the school. Maybe it was because I had poured everything into studying, but up until the exams, I didn't see Alan once. With Lucy's help, my grasp of the material grew stronger and more confident. During the 3 days of the college entrance exam, I felt almost detached, as if I were floating through it all. Only after I finished the final test did it truly hit me. I had actually done it. I had taken the college entrance exam. Back when Lucy Miller took the college entrance exam, she'd been remarkably good at estimating her own score. Even though a few years had passed, I couldn't find anyone more reliable, so I went to her for help again. Her mind was still sharp and quick. I remembered clearly every answer I'd written, and together we went through each question twice without pause. When we finished, Lucy stared at me in disbelief. "Lisa, you've improved so much. If you'd taken the exam back then, you would have definitely gotten into a great university." Looking at the final score we'd calculated on paper, I couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement, but I only smiled at her words. I knew that the version of myself from my previous life could never have achieved even half of what I'd done this time. It was my unwillingness to give up, and the value I placed on this second chance, that drove me to work so hard to change my fate. Considering my score and the future needs of the country's development, I chose to major in finance. In my previous life, while managing an entire household, I had discovered my natural sensitivity to numbers. This time I had intentionally focused on math and practiced relentlessly, and I realized I truly had a talent for it. Money wasn't the most important thing in life, but after years of being humiliated and held back because of poverty, I had become determined to make enough so that my father and I could finally live the kind of good life we'd never even dared to dream of. After submitting my university application, I turned my attention back to my father's snack shop. After observing the customers for a few days, I noticed we already had quite a few regulars, so I began helping him create new menu items. One afternoon, while I was cleaning up, someone asked if we still had any food left to sell. I looked up and froze for a second. It was Mrs. Reed. I quickly put on a polite smile. "I'm sorry, we've sold out for today." Her eyes lingered on me, filled with the same mixture of confusion and familiarity I'd once seen in Alan Reed's gaze when he first met me in this life. She opened her mouth as if to say something several times, but when she saw how busy I was, she stayed silent and left quietly. What I didn't know then was that after that brief encounter, Mrs. Reed dreamed about me twice. But every time she woke, she couldn't remember what had happened in those dreams, only the lingering sense of loss when she saw me again. Eventually, I received my admission letter. I'd been accepted into my first-choice university. When my father found out the school was over 500 kilometers away, he was overjoyed, yet reluctant, to see me go. After he helped me settle in, and we stood outside the campus gate, I pointed toward a still-developing street, lined with half-finished stalls. "Dad, what if you moved your snack shop here? College students love street food way more than the neighbors back home. You'd have great business." When my father had first followed me to the city, he'd left our small village store in the hands of someone he trusted. Nearly a year later, it was still running well. Even after paying the employee's salary, he was earning a solid profit each month. That success made him consider my suggestion. It's true, the shop back home doesn't bring in much, and it practically runs itself. But the food stand, that's your creation. If we hand it over to someone else, won't it affect our reputation? His concern was reasonable, but I'd already thought it through. I knew exactly who to entrust it to. In both my previous life and this one, Lucy Miller had helped me more than I could ever repay. After spending a full year working closely with her and her family, I'd come to understand their personalities and work ethic. Her older sister's job at the food factory was stable for now, but I knew that in a little over a decade, she'd lose that job when the factory went bankrupt. I still remembered how, in my previous life, Lucy once told me that after her sister was laid off, she divorced her husband and struggled to make ends meet. Lucy Miller's sister had ended up living a miserable life, struggling to raise 2 children on her own after the divorce. Although the layoffs at the factory were still years away, I knew I could start preparing now to help them build a better future. Lucy's mother was actually younger than my father, but their whole family lived squeezed together in a cramped apartment. Even though both daughters had decent jobs, they still barely made ends meet. I had never been sure how to repay Lucy for everything she'd done for me, but the moment I saw the small food street outside my university, an idea took shape in my mind. My mother had died young, and my father was my only family. In my previous life, he had passed away before I'd even made it into college. This time, I wanted to spend as much time with him as I could. My father knew how much Lucy and her family had helped me, finding work, preparing for exams, everything. When I told him my idea, he thought about it for a long time before finally nodding. "I've met Lucy's parents," he said. "They're good, honest people who know how to manage life. I'll go talk to them myself. You should call Lucy first, see what she thinks." After putting my father on the train, I called Lucy at work. I got straight to the point and explained my plan. For a long time, she didn't say anything. I thought the signal had cut off and called her name several times before hearing her choked-up voice. "Lisa, I'm just too touched. Are you really planning to let my parents take over your family's snack shop? You have no idea how much this means. My sister's little girl was seriously ill a while ago. Her husband's family never liked having a daughter, and when the child got sick, they didn't care at all. My parents used up all their savings just to save her life. Honestly, my dad's been out doing odd jobs these past few days to make ends meet." That only confirmed my decision. Part of the reason I'd wanted to help Lucy's family was because her parents reminded me so much of my own father. They never favored sons over daughters, and treated every child with equal love and sacrifice, even if it meant living a hard life themselves. Before I could bring up the profit-sharing arrangement I'd planned, Lucy spoke again. Don't worry, Lisa. My parents would never leak your family's recipes. They'll just help your dad run the shop and take a normal salary. You focus on your studies. We'll make sure the business keeps thriving." With Lucy acting as the bridge between us, my father quickly reached an agreement with her parents. After teaching them all his recipes and methods in detail, he handed over the shop keys to Lucy's mother. "I'm counting on you now," he told her. "I'm going to the city to be with my daughter." By the time Lucy told me about this conversation over the phone, my father was already on the train heading my way. While he'd been back home, I had rented him a place in the city and prepared everything he'd need for his new food stall: the cart, the utensils, the supplies. And just like that, in the first month of my university life, my father's new stall, Neighbor's Snacks, became the most popular food stand outside the campus. I hadn't expected to ever see Alan Reed again, but somehow he found out which university I was attending. One evening, as I was about to leave campus to help at the stall, he appeared at the gate and blocked my way. At first glance, I almost didn't recognize him. The man standing in front of me barely resembled the one I'd once spent a lifetime with. Before we married, Alan had been a clean-cut college student. After marriage, he'd never had to worry about meals, clothes, or chores. Everything was taken care of for him. Even when he grew old, he was meticulous about his appearance, a neat and proper old man. But the man before me now, his beard was unshaven, dark circles ringed his eyes, and his clothes were filthy, the collar and cuffs stained with grime. "Lisa," he said hoarsely, his voice trembling, "I was wrong. I finally understand what a bastard I was in our past life. Please forgive me. Give me another chance. I want us to live a good life together." A few days ago, I called Lucy Miller, and she told me about Alan Reed's recent situation. About a week earlier, a woman had shown up at his workplace looking for him. The moment they met, Alan's face changed completely. No one knew what she said to him, but the two of them started arguing loudly, right at the front entrance. Alan had already fallen out of favor with most of his colleagues, so normally, if no one reported it, the whole incident would have just blown over. But somehow, word reached the higher-ups. His supervisor, who'd long been displeased with him, seized the chance to issue a disciplinary warning. Afterward, Alan completely lost control. He kept muttering to himself, "Impossible. It can't all be fake," and then was fired by the department head. From what Lucy told me, I could guess why Sharon White had come looking for Alan. Perhaps she had realized her childhood sweetheart wasn't the right man for her after all. She had always been good at manipulating men. Maybe she thought of Alan, who had once been obsessed with her, and came back to use him again. But the Alan she met this time wasn't the same man as before. The sudden contrast between her expectations and reality must have shattered him. Even now, as I looked at Alan standing in front of me, I could see something deeply wrong in his eyes. His spirit was unstable, his emotions erratic. Glancing around at the busy street filled with passers-by, I shifted my footing slightly and said quietly, "Alan, we've both been given a second chance. Let's stop torturing each other. I already wasted one lifetime on you. This time, no matter what happens, I'll never let myself get tangled up with you again." Alan suddenly let out a choked sound and struck his own face hard. "I'm a bastard. It's all my fault. I didn't cherish you when I should have. Lisa, what will it take for you to forgive me?" His loud voice began to draw stares from the people nearby. My heart sank. I couldn't let him destroy the life I'd built for myself. Just as I was trying to think of a way to end the scene, a man's voice came from behind me. "Who the hell are you? Why are you saying such disgusting things in public and slandering my girlfriend's name?" It was Chris Walker. His sudden appearance and his words caught me completely off guard. Alan froze, staring at Chris before slowly turning his gaze back to me. "Lisa Green? Who is he? You're my wife. How can you be involved with another man?" The semester had only just begun, and not many people at the university knew me yet, but everyone knew Chris. As the student council president and my direct superior, he naturally drew attention wherever he went. Now, with a love triangle unfolding in public, students began to gather, whispering. Flustered and furious, I instinctively wanted Chris to stay out of it, but he stepped forward instead. "Don't worry, Lisa," he said calmly. "I've seen men like him before. As long as I'm here, he won't lay a finger on you. Then, raising his voice so the crowd could hear, he faced Alan squarely. You're harassing her in public and spouting nonsense. Who exactly do you think you are? His clear, firm tone made the onlookers murmur among themselves. The strange looks people had been giving me shifted instantly into disapproval directed at Alan. Alan's face flushed with anger. Lisa Green, tell them yourself. Are you really going to pretend you don't know me? In this life, apart from his short research stay in my village years ago, Alan and I had no connection whatsoever. No one here knew that we had once been husband and wife in another lifetime. So I widened my eyes, putting on a panicked expression, and shouted hoarsely, I don't know you. You keep showing up and saying crazy things. What do you want from me? I told you, if you keep harassing me, I'm calling the police. The school security guard, who had been watching the growing crowd, arrived just in time to hear me say, harassment and police. Without hesitation, he turned and sprinted toward the nearby police station. Moments later, 2 officers came running back with him. The moment they appeared, the noisy crowd fell silent. Alan stared at me in disbelief. Lisa, you're serious? You'd call the cops on me? I'm a professor. You a peasant woman who got lucky enough to marry me. You should be grateful. I didn't need to say another word. The officers had already stepped between us, and the disgusted looks from the crowd said everything that needed to be said. The moment Alan Reed shouted those words, everyone around could tell there was something seriously wrong with him. The police quickly stepped in and led him away from the crowd, but Alan kept turning his head back toward me, shouting at the top of his lungs. Lisa, tell them to let me go. I'm your husband. You can't do this to me. Chris Walker spoke up firmly, his tone calm but commanding. As everyone can see, this man's clearly unstable. Nothing he says can be trusted. Please, everyone, don't misunderstand or spread rumors about her. Chris was highly respected on campus, so the moment he spoke, the tension eased. People in the crowd began murmuring their support. Don't worry, we get it. Lisa's the one being harassed here. Yeah, no one's going to hold this against her. I'll remember that guy's face. If he ever comes back to bother you, just shout. We'll help you. As the crowd gradually dispersed, I watched Chris walking at the back. His composure, the quiet authority in his voice, it made me pause. Then he turned to me, his expression soft but serious. Lisa, about what I said earlier, what do you think? I froze, realizing he was referring to the words he'd used to defend me, calling me his girlfriend. My face flushed hot. I know you were just helping me, I stammered quickly. Don't worry, I won't take it the wrong way or tell anyone. He shook his head gently, cutting me off. That's not what I meant. His lips curved into a faint smile, but his gaze held an unmistakable sincerity. Lisa, from the moment I first saw you, I liked you. Would you let me have the chance to take care of you? For a moment, my heart stopped. 2 lifetimes, and this was the first time anyone had confessed to me so earnestly. I panicked a little, unsure what to say. My mind went blank. Seeing my awkward silence, Chris smiled again, his voice softening. You don't have to answer right now. Take your time. I can wait. By my sophomore year, my father had managed to rent a small storefront just across from the university. Around the same time, with the help of my professors and Chris, I started a small side project. It ended up earning me a decent amount of money, quite a lot for that era. When Chris confessed to me for the 3rd time, I finally said yes. Unlike Alan Reed, he respected me. He gave me space to grow and supported me in every way he could. When I was tired, he was there with quiet strength, never demanding, never controlling, just steady, reliable warmth. As for Alan, one day I overheard the campus security guard mention him. They said his family had taken him back home, then sent him to a mental hospital. Every tear that falls today might just be the debt of a past life. Once they made someone cry, now it's their turn to suffer. But tell me, how many tears does it take to pay for a broken promise? You're listening to Tiny Storytime YT.